When it seemed that the world was at a standstill, God was still working, and He was using His church to work. And I think that was one of the most important lessons that I've learned in 2020, is that in the waiting, God is still working, and then He allows us the privilege of seeing that. Every year, Matt collects an offering during our Christmas Eve services, and because of your generous giving, we are able to fund our outreach ministries for an entire year just based off of that one offering. This allows us to do our ministry with foster families, with the public schools, the Matt Garage, and our refugee ministry.
The Christmas Eve offering that was given last year was very generous, and it's applied a lot of exciting and important things.
2020 started out, like a lot of years do, with just a lot of hopes and dreams and planning for ministry. As 2020 unfolded, there just ended up being more questions than answers.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has confirmed the first U.S. case has been detected in Washington state.
Breaking news tonight, the coronavirus outbreak declared a global pandemic.
Across the country, more than 80 million are now under a virtual lockdown.
The warning from the nation's frontline ER doctors, the situation is critical.
The governor said, effective immediately, face masks will be required at businesses and public buildings.
As the pandemic hit, there's unrest around the world, just layers of loss. It just got really complicated, and I ended up questioning, Lord, what are you calling us to do here? What ministry are we supposed to be doing? How am I supposed to be connecting with the people that you've called us to minister to? And what am I personally supposed to be doing in ministry?
One of the really cool things we were doing at the beginning of the year was English classes for refugees and for immigrants in our community. Now, COVID impacted our English classes dramatically. It was quite a blow. Because we had so many people grouped together, COVID meant that we couldn't do those classes at all.
What we ended up doing was delivering worksheets, flashcards, and learning materials to the adults in our English classes so that they continue learning on their own. At the same time, members of the church were cleaning out their houses, and they were bringing donations to the church for us to sort through, or to our homes for us to sort through. We had a great number of books and games and activities, and we were able to sort through those and distribute them. And each of our Congolese families was able to benefit from that. One really cool story from that was in all of the donations and all of the sorting, there were exactly enough children's Bibles to deliver to each child in each family. And even cooler than that was that they were at their appropriate level. So we had Bible board books for every toddler and preschooler. We had Bible storybooks for every school-aged kid all the way up through middle school. So that was just a really sort of a cool encouragement in the midst of just such a confusing time of not knowing how to meet needs and what we could do.
In our refugee population, over 80% of our families lost their jobs. And even getting food was just a hard thing for them. The things that they normally eat, like rice and beans and flour, those staples, were just nowhere to be found. And they didn't know where to find them. So kind of a cool thing that happened is we ended up partnering with the Missoula Food Bank and other organizations in Missoula, Soft Landing and the IRC. And so if one of us would find a food source, we would go to it and we would divide it up and get it out to the families. And so I ended up doing a lot of ministry out of my car. I know that doesn't sound very glamorous, but it was practically what needed to happen.
Our relationship with the public schools changed because of COVID too. Where we used to be able to go in and make lattes and give them to the staff and teachers as appreciation, we were no longer able to come into the schools. We used to be able to help provide tutoring through volunteers at MAC for kids at schools, and we weren't able to do that either. And so we had to find new ways to show appreciation. So the teachers and the staff of the schools have been working so hard to try and figure out just a completely new way of delivering education to kids and help them learn. And so we were able to do things like drop off gift cards.
One thing that I never foresaw that ended up being a ministry was I was able to sew fabric face masks for different organizations and agencies in the community, more than 600. I made youth-sized face masks and gave them to the different public schools that we have close partnership with. Chief Charlo School, Franklin School, and Meadow Hill School. So that was really fun and was completely unforeseen by me as a way to minister.
One win in November was, instead of hosting the monthly foster dinner at MAC, we asked life groups to cook a meal and then delivered it to families' homes, and they loved that. They were so appreciated. And again, it just goes back to that just desire we have for connection during this time, and for knowing that somebody remembers that I'm in a hard spot and that what I'm doing is hard. And we just can't wait for a time when we can be back together again. I've always enjoyed it when our ministries can work together, and this year, because Matt Kids was not able to host their annual Christmas party here at the church, they had decided to put together some Advent bags that would help families go through Advent with their children. And we had the idea to ask foster families if they would want to have one of those bags delivered to their home. And we had such a great response from that. There were over 50 kids that said yes, they would love to have a bag. So many of those families just are not connected to a church or don't have a strong church to go to. And so we're just really praying that God has planted some seeds there. I so appreciated just the little things that our church body was willing to help with. There was a time where a foster grandma called me, and she just was really low on financial resources, and her husband was going to be celebrating his birthday, and she did not even have enough money to buy supplies for a birthday party. And so she asked me, she was almost embarrassed, would there be anybody who could maybe just get me a cake mix so I could make a cake and we can celebrate with the kids. I talked to somebody at the church who had volunteered to shop, and the way that she responded was just so sweet. She not only bought a cake, but she bought strawberries and ice cream. She got pizza for the kids, balloons, and all these decorations, and just left it on this family's front porch. And just that way of creating hope again for that family, like someone cared about that little thing and values that birthday in your family, was such a sweet way to respond. And the grandma called me later with tears in her eyes and just said, thank you so much, for helping my family in just that tiny way.
The heart behind the Mac Garage is we're aiming to reflect God's heart of care for vulnerable individuals and to back that up with really practical support. Thankfully, that's a ministry that was not as deeply impacted by COVID. We were shut down for a while when the stay-at-home order was in place, but we have been able to continue since then because we have a smaller group of mechanics, and we only have 1 or 2 clients coming at a time.
One of the things I think that we learned in 2020 is that God reminded us that the church is not actually about the building that you're in or the programs that you're able to host or even going to church every Sunday, even a Sunday service. That's not really what church is, and it just belongs in the hearts of the people and in how they show God's love to others in their community. And so 2020 just allowed us some really practical ways to see that happen.
Even when everything stops, and even when we can't figure out what to do, people still have needs, and then oftentimes they're increased needs. God still sees the needs, He's still working, and He is faithful and creative, and He will always lead us if we just listen and we just follow. So He knows what He's doing. We just don't always know.
I think that God is continuing to work even in unexpected ways. And I believe that next year, we have plans and dreams about what we're going to do, how we're going to minister to our community. But I'm convinced that God is going to lead us, even if it's in unexpected ways. It is important to contribute to the Christmas Eve offering so that we can continue with the ministries that we have planned and the ministries that God has planned for next year.
God is calling us to be the church and to be present with His people, and He's given us an opportunity and a window to do that in our community. Practical support doesn't solve everything, but it is the beginning to so many things. And I guess the deeper impact is that when someone's need is met, it creates hope. And hope allows a relationship to grow, and that is exactly where we see God working. If you are wanting to be a part of God's work at MAC this year, we would so appreciate your gifts. And there are 3 different ways to give. There will be boxes in the foyer that you can put your check in as you're leaving. There, you may send a check to the church and just mark in the memo line Christmas Eve offering, or you may give online at this link and choose the Christmas Eve drop-down box. Thank you so much.